we're continuing on the topic of Saturn. So I gave you, in part one, I gave you a Jin Shinjutsu practice so you can actually harmonize that energy where Saturn is, because it feels so much pressure in life because of the resistance and our desire to rush through that aspect, but Saturn putting brakes in our psychic, saying no. It causes a lot of conflict, a lot of friction. Energetically, that shows up as some blocks, natural blocks, for a good reason in the flow. Excuse me. And so I gave you the flow that you can do on a daily basis, or once a week, or once a year. It doesn't matter. Whenever you remember, it will always be one of your personalized energetic flows that will always work nicely for you. In part two, we talked about Saturn return, and we ended with that 29-year cycle. I forgot to mention in that video that cycle repeats, and so obviously if you're approaching age 58, that also works for you. That is going to be your second Saturn return. And it's easy to track your Saturn return, because even if you don't know your chart, all you need is your year, and you can look up online where Saturn was in that year or at that time of your birth. But I want to give you something more. So now we're building on top of this Saturnian cycle. And that requires actually for you to be a little bit more familiar with your chart. If you're having troubles, I mean, there are a lot of apps there and websites on the internet. My only advice is don't go willy-nilly and use everybody's website, especially the freebies. I personally prefer to pay a small fee to get my chart than use the free, because there's always an issue of privacy. You're going to give these people your birthday and they'll give you the chart, but without paying them, you don't know how they're going to use your information. You know, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So that would be a little warning against that. But I've noticed many people already have the apps and using them. So if you have your ways, pull your chart. If you don't know how, I run labs, a very small labs, like 4 to 8 people every month. So pop in one of those labs and I'll be happy to show you how you can get your chart. So I will assume that you already have your chart. The next thing is, if you know the exact time of your birth, you know your ascendant. And your ascendant sets up the angles of your chart. On the eastern horizon, there was a point in the sky that was rising at the time of your birth. That's your ascendant. And somewhere up high in the sky is the point where the sun reached the highest point at that day, and that is called the midheaven. Across the ascendant, on the other side of the sky, is called the descendant, and across the midheaven is the bottom of the sky, which corresponds to your kind of spiritual roots, what kind of holds your life together in kind of like in a roots symbolism. This is where you keep it. It's the most private part of you, but it keeps you solid and grounded. The midheaven is really what you feel most comfortable showing people. So that's your reputation, your public standing. The ascendant is yourself, the way you present yourself. So this is what people see the first 5 seconds when they see you for the first time and shake hands and they see your face. 5 seconds later, you have opened your mouth and you talk, and maybe they hear you Mars, maybe you told them a story and they hear your Mercury. You know, a lot of things start flowing once they meet you, but those first 5 seconds, they see the facade, the appearance. This is the facade of your house. And so the ascendant is a lot about how we present ourselves to the world. And so the descendant, that's the last corner, is the one that is the energy that we have pushed the furthest away from our awareness, and it tends to show up as others in the world. So that is where the relationships, any energy that you can tap in only through a relationship, is going to show up there. So a lot of your partners, romantic partners, but also family, spouses, but also business partners, and sometimes even if you partner with someone on a project, they will be embodying that energy. Somehow you have had this cosmic contract to tap into the energy only through relationship. You need the world to reflect it back to you to see it. So where do these angles come into play in the context of Saturn? Pay attention where Saturn is currently in the sky, and see where that energy falls into this four, relative to these four angles. So back to the idea of the clock. So if you have the clock, the angles are going to be corresponding to the 9 o'clock is the ascendant, and the 3 p.m. on the other side is the descendant. The midheaven is going to be the 12 o'clock, top of the hour, and the bottom of the sky will be the 6 p.m. So that kind of splits your chart into four segments. When you look at the Saturn currently in the sky, and at the moment of this video, Saturn is currently in mid-Aries. Check where Aries falls into this chart, segmented into four parts. Is it between the 9 p.m. and 6 p.m.? I would call that part the obscure part. Now, it kind of carries some negative connotation, but if you find Aries right now between your 9 p.m. and 6 p.m., that means it's time for you to work inwards. You're picking up skills, you're consolidating resources, you are growing internally, figuring out what you want to do. Don't expect recognition. I actually have a story in my book, Effortless Reality, about what happened with me when the Saturn was in that part of my chart. And it helped me make peace with myself, because I was at work and I was extremely frustrated because I could see everybody getting recognition. Everybody was doing like half the work I was doing. And of course, they were getting all the accolades. And I was constantly forgotten, overlooked. A lot of frustration. I would go home, be bitter, stomp, sulk in the corner, my poor family, they had to listen to my tantrums. And I got peace by simply looking at the Saturn, recognizing that it's in that corner, the lower left corner of your chart, between 9 p.m. and 6 p.m. And I said, peace. Okay. From now on, I don't expect recognition. It's gonna come when the Saturn comes on top of my chart. But for now, and if the entire cycle takes 29 years, a quarter is a little bit over than 7 years. So 7 years in that quadrant or chart, a part of the chart, okay. I picked up a I picked up a spiritual practice. It was exactly during that time when I actually went through all the 365 lessons of A Course in Miracles. And maybe at another time, out of being too recognized, too busy with the external world, I wouldn't have had the motivation to see through. But it was an interesting time, and almost the universe kind of conspired to give me the space, the time. My kids were grown enough where the demand on my time and effort wasn't 24/7. The work was easy. People were overlooking my contributions. I was like, you know what, forget it. Then I'm not participating. On top of it, I even got a sabbatical from the college. I thought it was a recognition, but it wasn't. I ended up being alone, creating YouTube videos by myself. It was perfect time for me to actually work through that spiritual practice, which took 18 months. And that had stabilized my life for the following decades. Even nowadays, whenever something happens or I'm out of balance, or shocking developments in the world, I always fall back onto my practice. I have picked up this habit of always talking to Holy Spirit and knowing that He watches over me. But that is my practice, and your practice could be something else. But I'm giving you this as an example to see what happens in that segment. The next one is the lower right corner, from the 6 p.m. to the 3 p.m. And this is where you feel something emerging. And I felt it. I felt very impatient because you're so restless. You feel like you're emerging from that cocoon and you're ready to go, and you push and you show off to the world, but the world is not ready yet to see it. So that emerging power is there, and you're going to see it. Maybe you can find a new job. You can see things moving in your life, but not there yet. The next segment is from the 3 p.m. to the 12 p.m. And this is not only you emerging, but you're now rising, a rising star. And I'm just approaching that. So you can see I have been in this emerging portion, very impatient to share what I have learned, to show the world what I can bring and to give people all that gifts that I feel I can give. But it's not there yet. I have another probably a year or so to hit that. So what I can speak about that segment from 3 p.m. to 12 p.m. only based on the last cycle, since I'm already into my second Saturn cycle. So last time it felt, again, rising. I got into a PhD program, I aced my classes, and it felt like it was a recognition and a lot of accomplishments visible. People were seeing that. I was like, finally, I saw that. So at the 12 o'clock, we're talking about Saturn getting the recognition. If you go back to Will Smith's chart, you'll see that that is when he got his Academy Award. Saturn was on the top of his chart, where it was bringing the rewards in a very public way. So that is when you start getting that recognition from the external world. And it goes for a while until it hits the 9 p.m. again and another cycle. Now, this cycle depends on the exact time when you were born. So if you don't know the exact time, you will not be able to follow that cycle. Although I know there's some professional astrologers, but you have to look for those who specialize in rectifying birth time. So if you don't know the hour, you have three options. Forget about it. There are plenty of other things, and I'll show you what you can do. I already have shown you in the previous two videos on Saturn. So that's option one. It's like, forget it. I don't need it. I'll find something else. B, you can actually find an astrologer that specializes in rectifying charts. That's your keyword. Or C, you can probably try, if you have a reputable psychic, someone very intuitive, an intuitive counselor, they might be able to sniff the hour. But for that, it will depend on their skills. In any case, if you know the chart, if you know the time, you can do so much more, and I'll show you more in other videos. As always, if you have questions specifically about your chart, it's very difficult to get that information from the generic YouTube videos. So you're welcome to pop in the Cycles Labs that I usually hold once or twice a month. They're very affordable, and I keep them small because I really like keeping the interaction going on. So it's more like you pop in and you get answers to your questions.